You're included on a list of 77 individuals who have claimed Biden hasn't won fairly, and I was like, when did I claim Biden didn't win fairly? Like, pretty sure I'm constantly saying Biden did win, and been ragged on by Trump supporters for doing so. And the left made a video compilation of me mocking me for saying Biden won. So like, what's your point? She sends me a list of tweets. She's like, here's the tweets where you've called out fraud. And I'm like, okay. And the tweets are like, Elizabeth Holmes convicted of fraud, GoFundMe accused of fraud. And I was like, what does this have to do with the election? And so they include me still in this story. And so what I think's happening is that YouTube, they're politically biased. What I think's happening is we keep getting these stories where they try and claim that we've broken the rules. But no matter what, if YouTube took us down claiming we did, I'd sue them in 2 seconds for breach of contract because I know the rules and we did not break them. So what can they do? In the background, they can shadow them. They can do things like this to suppress the views, make sure people can't see it, and then they can try and appease the activists and be like, oh, look, we're doing everything we can to reduce misinformation, but they can't explicitly take action against us. It has to be subversive.
Well, and the other thing is, who do they choose to elevate, right? And it's not it's not just YouTube, but like if you look at the recommended videos or recommended podcasts in the Apple Podcast app, or the stuff they're highlighting for that month. Have you ever seen a conservative show up there?
No.
Ever?
Never. Why? So people have pointed this out all the time. We regularly will, we had, like in the past month, 60-something thousand concurrent viewers in political off-season. During the 2020 election, we were getting 150,000 concurrent viewers on the show. Never trended. Like that should have been featured as their top trending live show or one of them, and they just would never do it. So like outright, they try and silo shows like this, content like this. Now that we're into the October surprise time frame, it's no surprise that we're now hearing people being like, I can't find the show, it's not popping up. Some people are saying it doesn't even appear on our page itself. That they have to go to timcast.com or type in the URL manually, youtube.com/timcastirl/live. And once again, if everybody who's watching just shares it and posts the link, there is nothing they can do to censor it. Shadow banning won't work.
Yeah, YouTube essentially decides if people will ever see your content or not. And there's many different underhanded things that they could do to make sure people never see you. Even though you have a large subscription base, even though you're consistent, even though you have a schedule, it doesn't matter. I've been through it all throughout my entire YouTube career, and they could mess with you in the search. I remember I couldn't even find my YouTube channel. And I typed in, We Are Change. I typed in exact titles of videos that I did. Couldn't even find it. They do it through, of course, limiting notifications, demonetizations, downranking in the algorithm. And of course, who do they promote? CNN, CBS News, horrible track record, horrible organizations that I don't even call news organizations. They are propaganda organizations that have been caught multiple times lying on purpose, spreading disinformation, hurting people with the misinformation that, of course, they spread to the general public, and having a huge negative effect on the general public, pushing, of course, partisan bullcrap rather than, of course, actual news. And the people who do promote actual news, we get hurt by the algorithm, since, of course, there's this favoritism on YouTube, which elevates those voices that you were just mentioning.
So I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are on this, but what do you think is the answer to that? Because I mean, the way I see it is, you want to diversify, number one, and be available in multiple places, lots of places, hopefully across many different platforms. But I also think the conservative movement, anybody who cares about liberty in this country should get invested in creating our own platforms and our own tech and do everything. Like Mao said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Try a bunch of different things, but also build your own ecosystem at some point for when the day comes where no notifications go out for the show, right? And they totally block the account.
I mean, I think so. Part of me thinks that maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even, that would be, something that would be possible. But it's gotten to the point where the left has gone on offense so effectively that, okay, you can try to start your own platform, but they're going to make sure that you can't bank anymore.
Right. So that it's a really good point, because they get to the root of the internet, right? We're not even just talking about front end platforms now. They're talking about banking. We're talking about servers, right?
Yeah. They're like, your website can't be hosted.
Yeah.
You can accept $0.
But you can solve that problem, with the servers. You could be off AWS, for example, or whatever. But the banking part is really, really interesting.
And they've gotten very effective at trying that. Their entire strategy has moved like, you know, you used to be able to be a libertarian, I think, right? And it made sense. It's kind of like, leave me alone, live and let live. But at this point, that's not good enough. They don't want to let live. They will continue pushing forward. So basically, at this point, you're left with nothing but like you have to fight back.
And what they
against them.
can't get done through government, they get done through other institutions
now,
or corporations.
Corporations, which
the
are basically
scariest
another
reality.
left-wing entity.
Take a look at this. So I found it on. So it was on my phone. It's called Hit Pause, and this is one of these videos was in my feed automatically. But it was like when you open the YouTube app, you can see like the username, the video, and then the name of the video, whatever. These had their own special box. Let me actually see if I can pull it up on my phone and then actually just show you this because it's certainly not. I don't know. I wouldn't call it normal how it popped up on my feed.
It's 2000.
So take a look at this.
Yeah.
It's like it takes up the whole phone with a YouTube featured. Can you spot the manipulation? Learn more. This is not a normal YouTube channel, and it's happening right when the election's going on and are about to kick off. I mean, early voting is starting relatively soon. This is YouTube manipulating the election, hands down. Big Tech is manipulating the election on purpose. They're interfering. But you know what? I'm willing to bet there's going to be like one. I'll say one, maybe upwards of 5 Republicans who actually say anything. And even if they do, they're going to sit down in front of Big Tech and they're going to be like, "So you're choosing what can and can't be seen," and they're going to go, "Well, you know, we're trying to combat misinformation." And they're going to go, "Ooh, I shake my fist at that. I'm going to write a sternly worded letter to you." And that's the end. Then the Republicans are going to lose. And there you go. Congratulations.
So I think in terms of the political arena, I think the important part right now is we're in a situation where Democrats have the House, the Senate, the White House, right? We need to take control of at least one branch.
And the corporate media.
And the
big
corporate
tech social media.
And big tech social media. So ideally,
And Hollywood.
you know, and I mean, that's what
And
we're
the,
up
mu- and,
against.
the, and the music industry.
I mean, that's what we're up against.
And the higher institutions of learning.
This is getting pretty depressing.
So the thing is that we have to take a majority in either, you know, the House or the Senate or both, hopefully, that we can get a majority. And that's when we start holding our representatives, our senators' feet to the fire. Because without having a majority, you're just, you know, what can you do? You're getting railroaded.
Well, and if you have the House,
Vote.
if you have the gavel in the House, then you have the power to investigate, the power to subpoena, right? And that's an incredibly powerful thing to have. So yeah, I mean, getting a House majority in particular would be very useful for investigating some of this stuff. The one thing I would say though, also, I mean, like, look, I think the internet has been great for libertarians and conservatives. I think the internet is probably the most democratizing force in politics in the history since the printing press, right? And I think there's more of us than there are of them. And so the internet is obviously a place where finally we get to rebalance the teams, right? The corporate media is never going to give us an equal share. But on the internet, we have a chance. I think the big problem that we have with big tech or, you know, any of this stuff, this shadow banning and everything, is they're really responding to government incentives, right? Because, you know, their business model is, let's make as much money as we can, let's serve as many ads to people as we can, let's get as many users as we can. The only thing that threatens that is the government, right? And so they're going to respond to those incentives in a way that says, I want to work with you. You know, oh yeah, we'll regulate content. The people that you don't like, you know, we're going to shadow ban, so you're going to feel better about the content that the voters are seeing in this country. But, you know, if we get power, what's going to happen? You know, are they going to flip around and start banning a bunch of liberals? No, probably not.
Nope. So here's the video. This is really interesting. Let's play this. We have it. How we're tackling misinformation on YouTube, and it's very, very enlightening. Check it out. Let me make sure we have. Let's play. Let me make sure we have the sound turned on.
Oh, this is great.
Learn more about the topics that interest them. We have a responsibility to increase access to good information, while decreasing the bad.
To make sure that we're doing that, we tackle misinformation on our platform based on what we call 4 R's of responsibility. We remove the most harmful content that violates our policies. We reduce recommendations of borderline content. We raise up authoritative sources for news and information. And we reward trusted creators and artists.
You can learn more about how we enforce our policies in a separate video. But the bottom line is that we aim to enforce our community guidelines consistently using a combination of machine learning systems, content reviewers, and user reports to detect, review, and remove content that crosses the line. We strive to remove content that violates our policies before it's widely viewed or viewed at all. For more information about
The issue right there is that they reduce recommendations on what they deem to be borderline while propping up authoritative sources. How do you become an authoritative source? Corporate power and money. That's what it always is. That's why it was I think like 4 years ago, a whole swath of YouTubers noticed the recommendations collapsed from like 7 or 8% of their views to like 0.1. Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN shot straight up.
Yeah, they're pretty much saying, hey, you don't have a billionaire corporate, millionaire, agenda for your cause. You're screwed. Sorry. Good luck next time.
Yeah, well, that 4R thing was pretty horrific to see them break it down. And the thing is that that's actually not unprecedented at all. We saw in a previous cycle where Hunter Biden's laptop is labeled misinformation or propaganda from a Russian propaganda machine. And so those so-called authoritative sources are the ones who agreed, like almost like a cartel of information that like, we will not cover this at all. Yep. We're not going to highlight that. So when they say authoritative sources, are they going to hold accountable the people who told us 2 years ago that this is a Russian misinformation?
Or the Hunter Biden story?
Or the Hillary Russiagate?
Or WMDs in Iraq?
Right. Is YouTube going to go back and flag all the videos from the New York Times and the Washington Post and BuzzFeed all on the Russiagate stuff that wasn't real?
Yeah.
Are those flags, is that misinformation now? Are all of their accounts going to be blacklisted or downranked?
How many strikes do those channels deserve? Like New York Times for misinformation. Like there were 4 years of Trump's presidency where it was basically one after the other conspiracy theory that the media is running wildly with and irresponsibly with, while trying to do everything they can to silence it.
It's just wild to me we've gotten to the place in this country where we need to preemptively determine in a conversation, in a debate, who preemptively is correct.
Yeah, and what is borderline content? Who defines that? This is an Orwellian term that absolutely makes no sense at all and could be interpreted in so many different fashions.
I'll tell you who determines that. It's the loudest, furthest left-wing people on that company's Slack.
Yeah.
Who will make life a living hell for everyone if they don't get their way.
Oh, this borderline content doesn't work for my own political beliefs and biases.
Yeah.
Therefore, we have to take it down, even though it doesn't violate the rules or the terms of services or the code of conduct.
They're like,
that's
this
what they're doing.
person's content is to the right of Bernie Sanders, so it is dangerous and could kill me. Like, everything's always framed as being dangerous.
That person hasn't left their house in 2 years.
Right there. The World Socialist website called Bernie Sanders a Nationalist Capitalist.
Amazing.
And that was a couple years ago, so what they're really saying is, you're only 1 degree to the left of Stalin? Gotta go.
Yep.
Gotta go. Not far left enough. I don't know how much further left you can go after that, but here we are, ladies and gentlemen. So my question, I guess I'm wondering, here's the challenge in terms of a lawsuit. How do you know you're being affected by it? Right now, it's speculation. A lot of people are reporting they're not getting notifications. They're also reporting that the app is crashing. And we've noticed some interesting things with the live show that is completely atypical. We'll have like 40,000 live viewers, and then in 10 minutes, or not even in 10 minutes, but in like one jump, it'll go like 41,000, 38,000, which it makes no sense. That 3,000 people all at once, all just like decided, you know what, at this point, I'm turning the show off. But people are telling us it's crashing on them. The challenge is, let's say we are being negatively impacted by this and it's a breach of contract. What are the rules? Did we break them? How do we know? When I sign up for YouTube and I agree to do this business, and a portion of my ad revenue goes to them, they have to abide by their side of the bargain as well. If they're telling me now that they're altering the terms without saying anything to me, and I sign an agreement, they're changing, then what can we do? I mean, if we sue, the court's going to be like, YouTube's going to say it's not happening. And then I'm going to say, well, I want discovery to see exactly how their algorithm is doing this. And then it's probably going to get thrown out because the courts just always, look, big corporations win. That's how it plays out.
I mean, that's the thing, is that at the end of the day, you know, Google owning YouTube is going to have an army of attorneys who 24 hours a day will fight to ensure that no one can ever see a lick of the algorithm that they have that determines any of this, you know? They absolutely can't let any of that out. I mean, that's the whole question. I think it's going to require the government intervening. It's going to require Republicans to take the
actually do something.
Well, already
and start punishing.
Look. Already, Alex Berenson got an opinion from I think it's a federal court that big tech does not have the ability to censor arbitrarily or something to that effect. It's huge. I mean, this opinion could open the floodgates. The challenge is you still need to prove they took an action. So right now we have speculation. YouTube 13 days ago said, we are going to start doing this thing. Recently, people said, hey, I'm noticing a thing on your channel. So it's speculative. What can we do to get discovery or anything like that? We can argue that around this time we saw a reduction in our live show viewership, and that's censorship, and they might just argue, nah, your show sucks. And what do you say? The judge is going to be like, unless you can prove something was actually done. So,
well, maybe in Discovery we could see, hey, they're talking about limiting these channels.
You won't even get to Discovery unless you can say they did a thing to damage my business in violation of a contract. So this is the problem with big tech. Everything that Ian brings up all the time, and this he's right about. The one thing I don't agree with Ian on is he says, we got to free the software code. If you guys watch the show, you've heard him say it, and I'm like, why? But when he's talking about this, just we're going to free the code, it's going to fix everything, I'm like, you're wrong. But when he says we got to free the code because otherwise you don't know what the corporations are doing, he's completely right. So I don't know if you know, freeing the code might not necessarily be the right thing, but there is a problem in that Facebook has been experimenting on people and manipulating people. We got that report from the Washington Post that there's psychological operations targeting, people, that it was mostly pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia. If we don't know what these platforms are doing, they could be doing illegal things. How do we solve for that? What's the oversight? Right? So, if you want to open a restaurant and sell cheeseburgers, you know how many permits you're going to get, how hard it is? In fact, I think it's too hard. It shouldn't be that hard to sell a cheeseburger. But it's so insanely easy, relatively, to manipulate the public with algorithms meant to drive them insane or push political bias.
Exactly. I mean, from the very beginning, I've always been talking about the intelligence agencies and their influence on big tech social media, and I think that's becoming more and more apparent. There's Fauci parody accounts that are being taken down because the U.S. government is saying, hey, this is not okay. We don't like you making fun of our Lord and Savior, Dr. Fauci. Hey, this former New York Times journalist bringing up scientific facts and studies and research, we don't like that because it goes against our agenda, and they're bending the rules of society and screwing everyone else over, providing a huge disservice to everyone online by limiting the amount of information that could go into their ears and mind. That to me is godlike authority that they are absolutely abusing. They should have never been trusted in the first place with this power and authority, but yet here we are today, which is crazy.
I'll tell you the one thing that we can do for the time being. Obviously, so we had an issue with NewsGuard. You guys familiar with NewsGuard?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So they gave us an 82 out of 100. Let me just say, YouTube, your beloved Bill Gates NewsGuard. Okay, NewsGuard has a deal with Microsoft. Some people will clarify that it's not Bill Gates funding it. No. They have a deal with Microsoft that embeds the NewsGuard thing. I use that specifically because it's a check against their attacks against us.
It's a good insurance policy for sure.
A good example of how this plays out. I had a legal dispute with them that was resolved, and we ultimately won to the best of what we could win. And there's no pursuit after this. But I'll explain. They emailed me about Timcast.com and said that you had 2 stories alleging that Hunter Biden was helping secure funding for biolabs in Ukraine, or something like that, on your YouTube channel. How do you explain this? And my response was just like, those 2 stories that you're talking about are cited by 2 NewsGuard certified sources. And they went, oh yeah, sorry about that, never mind. So they tried claiming falsely that the Hunter Biden laptop story was fake to me, that the emails weren't real to me, NewsGuard, and I said, NewsGuard certified these 2 outlets who have independently verified the emails are real. Next question. So what do? They come back and they claim that because we quoted Trump without fact-checking him, we're irresponsible and give us a strike. Still, we're at 82 out of 100, considered green checkmark. We have a higher rating than CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, all of those major outlets. But it took them about 3 weeks to correct a plethora of errors. So I came to them and I said, fix the error. They said no. Fix the error. I said no. I said, if now acknowledging there's errors, you won't fix them, I'm going to sue you. They came back and they were like, you'll never win because we'll claim all of these are opinion, except they are fact. And then I was just like, what? Ultimately, what they ended up doing, they did back down on everything except removing the strike. So we remain at 82 out of 100, but they issued this ridiculous wall of corrections because it was just insanely wrong. But so this is the issue. I bring that up because people have asked me about, like, are you going to sue NewsGuard? I'm like, we won. I can't. Right? It's over. I talked to 3 different lawyers, I think, and they said, you won. They issued a wall of retractions and corrections, but they're not going to rate you better. I don't think a judge is going to get a pass summary. He's going to be like, you got what you wanted. And then I'd argue, no, they're calling me irresponsible. Well, it's an opinion. Have a nice day. You're out. In this capacity, what YouTube is doing, we need to, especially considering the Alex Berenson opinion that came out, showing they have no right to censor, we need to make sure we're doing everything in our power to stop YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter from deciding what is true. This should not be allowed. Imagine if AT&T is the example everyone uses. Her was intercepting your phone calls, and they were like, I don't know, you said something I didn't like that I didn't think was true, so they hang up on you. Right? They can't be allowed to do that. For the time being, here's what y'all can do. YouTube is powerless against a popular show. They're completely powerless against it. They could shadow ban the channel so that it can only be viewed if you type in the website URL, and then we post it on timcast.com, and if you're a fan of the show, you find it. They are presumably trying everything in their power, and I think other people have it worse than me. Don't get me wrong. I think they've been going after Crowder way harder than they go after us. So long as people actually like the show, actually tune in, and be the notification, share the URL wherever you can. Oh, they'll start banning people one by one for sure, but you genuinely cannot stop a show that's popular when people decide, I'm going to tune in every day at 8, regardless of whether or not YouTube notifies me. So they're trying to stop people from finding it, but if people watching it say, no, I'm going to share it because it's a good show, they're powerless. They can't stop it.
I mean, to me, I think what is long overdue and what's going to be necessary is for Congress to not be toothless for these organizations, and it's going to take a consent decree. The same way that you've seen, monolithic companies in the past where the government says you've gone too far, there needs to be a consent decree on Google, consent decree for Twitter, especially given that we now know, and it's become widely apparent to anyone who's willing to see the truth, that in an election cycle, all these companies, the big tech companies, the large corporate media companies banded together and created a cartel of information and said, no, voters aren't allowed to know this.
They regret the internet.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't see it coming.
No, they really do. They really do, because it's the biggest threat to legacy media, right? It allows us an end run.
Legacy.
Yeah. An end run around all the traditional gatekeepers that you see on cable news every night to information that you can seek yourself. I mean, it's the biggest threat to their entire business model.
Yeah, it temporarily allowed a free market where people got to choose ideas and individuals and trusted individuals that, of course, did their work, did their homework, over, of course, the propaganda.
But there's a lot of cross currents in this too, and it's just fascinating, this whole debate on tech and the media and everything and censorship, because some of the biggest proponents of a lot of the tech regulations that are working their way through Congress are the legacy media folks themselves, because it's a market share thing for them. They think if they can regulate tech more, that they'll restore their position in this, new ecosystem where Congress can sort of work the refs a little bit at all the platforms, and maybe CNN gets ranked higher, and people on Facebook will see CNN's content more in their feed rather than Ben Shapiro, for example. So I think we got to be really careful here. I think there's two distinctions, right? There's putting government more in charge of refereeing that whole thing, and these sort of blanket things that you said, Smug, which I think is fantastic, where you could say, look, I mean, if there's a direct call to physical violence, a media call physical violence, yeah, I mean, maybe you can censor that. But everything else, fine. I mean, if it's like, I don't know, pedophilia, yeah, you can censor that. But anything else, it's fine. And you don't have a right to censor anyone, regardless of their political opinion. And I mean, I don't know what normal person in this country could look at the last couple of years and everything that we are fed, on COVID or anything else, and think, we don't need a free market of ideas.
Yeah.
We don't need a debate that lingers for a long time. That people should be allowed to say stuff that's wrong. That people saying stuff that is wrong and not being censored for it is actually probably healthy for a democracy.
So, when was the internet? The 80s? Like, the first iteration was the early 80s or something?
Was it Al Gore?
Yeah.
It was all Al Gore.
It was, I'm pretty sure it was DARPA.
Yeah.
And preliminary. I don't know the original history, but
It was the
early on.
universities and the Defense Department.
Yeah. And it was like, hey, I need to send information for a database really quickly or whatever, so we'll connect these computers. And then you get the early 90s, and I remember watching this video where this guy is saying, maybe you guys have seen it, he's like, the internet's not going to catch on.
Yeah.
Makes no sense. And they were showing, like, you can buy movie tickets just on your computer like this. And he's like, no one's going to want to do that. It's too complicated. And now the world is the internet.
Right.
So back then, the powers that be, the legacy, not just the media, politicians, the financial institutions, the wealthy elites, they were like, who cares? Then the internet became ubiquitous, and they were like, who cares? Then Donald Trump won the election, and they went, my God, what have we done? And now, since then, they've been doing everything in their power to reverse this. In 2018, we saw the synchronized banning of Alex Jones. Just every platform, all at once, except for Twitter, and then Twitter waited like a week and then got him. I guess they were like, we're not doing what they're doing. Psych! Beep!
Wasn't there a leaked video at Google headquarters with their reaction to Trump's election?
Crying.
Yeah, people were crying and said, why did we let this happen?
And they had a town hall where they were like, okay, guys. It was basically a struggle session of like, we have to do everything we can to stop it.
Yes.
Okay.
The Sun has an article talking about how the videos came out and they were plotting essentially to stop Donald Trump's re-election after 2020. And you could see that they rigged the game, because I think a lot of people who helped start these big tech social media companies, well, a lot of them are connected to, of course, intelligence agencies. I've been talking about this for a very long time, and we have been seeing big tech social media act on the behest of them more and more, and it's becoming more clear and more obvious. And I think they realized that if they could control the algorithm, they could control people's perceptions, they could control people's minds. And that's a power that is extremely addicting. I think that's a power that has influenced a lot of these major decisions, and I think what we're seeing right now is a slow squeeze. First, you got to get the radicals, you got to get the crazies, you got to get the racists, and everyone's like, yeah, sure, this crazy guy who believes in flat Earth or whatever, get rid of him, whatever. This racist, yeah, get rid of him. But now it's individuals like Alex Jones. Now it's politicians. Now it's scientists. Now it's legitimate journalists. Now it's borderline content. You don't even have to violate any rules. It doesn't matter. You're still getting cut. You're still not going to be shown to anyone. Your career's screwed over. CNN, Anderson Cooper, come on in with your CIA connections. You could say whatever you want with us. We'll even do deals with you, which they did, which is absolutely crazy.
When we had Dr. Drew on the show, this was really funny, because we started talking about the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, on YouTube's side, interruptions, the stream is freezing. Hilarious. The moment we shift and start talking about Civil War, everything's fine again. Then immediately I'm like, wait, let's go back to the pandemic, and then it starts freezing again. And I'm just like, dude, at this point, you're not convincing me this is a coincidence. We had someone on the show, I can't remember who it was, but Luke started talking about the CIA, and then all of a sudden, the stream freezes. And then people came back later, and they're like, you know, there's like a minute missing from your show. And we're like, oh, gee, I wonder what happened. Just a big mistake. It's always just a big mistake. You know what, man? You know what I think? I think they don't like this show. I think they like it to a certain extent. We're not as egregious or overt as a lot of the people they could easily ban, and so it creates a problem. We call out the lies. We call out Joe Biden. We fact-check the manipulations in the media, particularly with things like Russiagate and Ukrainegate, repeatedly. We rag on Barack Obama for killing kids. These things are all true and in the mainstream press. And they just really wish the people running big tech who wish Trump never won, politicians, they really wish that we would just shut up and say the things they tell us are approved to say. Like, Ukraine good, Russia bad.
I mean, that's the thing is, I think that was just such a shock to their system when Trump won, that like, wait, this isn't what we had planned. This isn't someone on our team. What the hell's going on? We all agreed it was going to be Hillary, right? Like, they were so shocked, and they're like, okay, this is such a legitimate threat for our ability to be able to kind of like prognosticate what's coming next and help steer it in the way that we need it steered. And so when Trump shows up and it's just an absolute, just it crumbles what they needed to happen, is when you started seeing these things at Google where they're having a struggle session to be like, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? Because we don't want anything to happen that we can't predict and control.
Yeah, and the connections are a lot more obvious than people think. Even Eric Schmidt, the former head of Alphabet, now working with the Weaponized Information Pentagon Board, by the way. But when he was head of Alphabet, he was working with Hillary Clinton on her campaign, and he even bankrolled a lot of the early think tanks that came out with the term fake news before the 2020 election. I asked him about this. I was like, all right, don't you see this as a huge bias, as you starting and weaponizing the term fake news and using it against predominantly the Republicans with this larger push for censorship when you're a part of Alphabet, Google, and YouTube. And he ended up cursing at me because this was also outside of the Bilderberg meeting. He wasn't very happy about that. And I had to, tell him promptly, like, hey, man, don't curse on my YouTube video. You're going to get it demonetized.
Let's do this.
You can see that video on my YouTube channel still, if you could find it.
We're going to hit two birds with one stone with this story here from the Indian Express. I'm going to show you how they manipulate you and why they don't like shows like ours. The Indian Express reports, selectively zoomed in video by Republican Twitter account shows Biden being lost on stage after speech.
Okay.
For what reason is the headline of this NewsGuard certified outlet saying selectively zoomed in video by Republican Twitter account? Why don't they just say